My name is Mac Turley, and this is my presentation for SIT233 Task 6.1. In this video, I'll be going through the different services and components I've created to host a highly available WordPress application. So in the first phase of the video, I'll go through the different components and services I've configured manually, and then in the second phase, I'll go through the services that have been automated through CloudFormation. So to get started, I'll run through my network related resources. So you can see here, I've got the application VPC, which has 4 subnets, 2 route tables, and then 2 network connections. So you can see here that the VPC and subnets have been correctly configured, and they show the correct routes to both the Internet Gateway and NAT Gateway. So you can see here, I've got 2 public subnets and 2 private subnets. Which have been routed to 2 route tables, a private and public route table, which are then connected to the Internet Gateway and NAT Gateway. Moving on to the specific subnets themselves, so you can see here there's 2 public web subnets and the 2 private app subnets, and then you can see that each subnet has a unique IPv4 CIDR block. So now I can quickly show you my route tables, so they have the correct connections. So you can see here for the public route table, I've got a route to the Internet Gateway with the explicit public subnet associations, and then for the private route table, you can see here I've got a route to the NAT Gateway, and I've explicitly associated the private subnets with this route table here. I'll quickly also show you my network gateways. So you can see here I've got the app host Internet Gateway, which has been created in the correct application VPC. And then for my NAT gateway, you can see the first one I created here. It's been deployed in the public's web subnet 1. I'll quickly show you my launch template that I've created as well. So this is the PHP server launch template, which is used in my auto scaling group to create a web server EC2 instance. So you can see here under instance details, it has all the configurations that have been provided under the task requirements in the 6.1 task sheet. And here is my WordPress auto scaling group. So you can see here I've created a auto scaling group that has a desired capacity of 1 and has a minimum scaling limit of 1 and maximum scaling limit of 3. And you can see here it uses the launch template I just covered previously. And then also you can see here it will deploy EC2 instances in the private subnet. So if I click on edit, you can see here that it is using the private app subnet 1 and 2. So now I'll run through the different EC2 instances I've created that are associated with the application VPC. So the first one I'll cover is the Bastion host, which is used to securely access the other EC2 instances via a terminal. So you can see here it's been created in the public subnet 1, and it has a public IP assigned to it. You can see if I click on security, it has a Bastion security group, which just allows port 22 access from my IP address. So that allows me to securely access the instance from the terminal. And moving on, I'll show you my scaled PHP server, which is the web server that is created by the auto scaling group. You can see here it's attached to the WordPress ASG, and it's been deployed in a private app subnet 1. You can see here under security, if I go through the inbound rules, you can see it allows port 22 access from my Bastion security group, and then it also allows port 80 HTTP access from the application load balancer security group. And then finally, my AMI web server, you can see here, that's been created in the public subnet 2. And you can see here if I quickly use the security tab and the inbound rules, you can see here it allows port 22 access from my IP again, and then also just port 80, so HTTP access from any source to allow anyone to access the web server. Now, I'll also quickly run through the security groups I've associated with each of my application resources. So I've used the principle of least privilege for each of my security groups. So you can see here for the PHP web server that I am using a specific security group just to allow that SSH access from my Bastion host, and then also the HTTP port 80 access from the ALB. And then next, if I click on the ALB security group, you can see that just allows HTTP access from any source. And then thirdly, my Bastion host, which uses the SSH access from my IP. Then finally, the AMI security group, which also allows SSH access from my IP, and then also HTTP traffic from any source because it is in that public subnet too. Now moving on to the databases I've created. So you can see here I have got a WordPress DB and a read replica of that primary database. So you can see here the primary database has been configured in the 1A region and it has multi-AZ enabled. And then the read replica has been configured in the 1B region here. So I'll quickly show you the subnet group that I've created for those databases. So you can see here, it's been associated with the private subnets as well. And then if I go back to database, I'll quickly show you the connectivity. So it's got the endpoint and it's using the 3306 port. You can see here, it's associated with the application VPC. And I'll quickly just open this database security group in a new tab to show you the inbound rules. So you can see here that it is using two MySQL rules to port or forward that traffic and allow that traffic from the AMI security group and the PHP security group to allow those instances to access the main database. So now I'll go back to the database itself, and I will show you the configuration. So you can see here, it's using the 8.0.3 Vive engine. It's also using the MySQL 8 database configuration settings. And you can see here, it's got a admin username, and then obviously a master password. And the replica database obviously has pretty much the exact same configurations here. Finally, I'll just cover the general purpose S3 bucket that I've created, which will be integrated with the WordPress application that allows me to upload media to the bucket. So you can see here I've got the WordPress bucket 233 that's been created. And if I click on that, you can see here that under the permissions tab, all public access has been blocked. So now what I'll do is I'll test the WordPress application. So firstly, I will click on the load balancers tab. And what I'll do is I'll copy the DNS name of the WordPress LB and I'll open a new tab and I'll paste that here. You can see here that I'm able to connect to the application. So what I'll do now is I'll start configuring the database. So I'll quickly jump back into my RDS tab here, which has all my configuration settings. So you can see here the DB name is WordPress. I'll copy that and paste. And the username here you can see is admin. I'll copy that one over as well. And the password, which I have on a notepad here, I'll paste that into there. And now for the database host, we remove the local host default setting. And what we'll do is copy the endpoint of the WordPress DB and paste that in. And then we'll leave table prefix as the default setting, and we'll submit that. And it's successful. We can run the installation, but I've already installed it obviously. So what I'll do now is I'll quickly log in. I'm using my student ID as the username, and I've got a password configured here. So everything's successful. I'm able to access the WordPress page. So what we'll do now is we'll go to plugins. You can see that I have to add a plugin. And what I'll do is I'll enter the WP Offload Media Lite into the search, and you can see here that I'll install that. See installed, and I'll just activate that now. And what I'll do now that it's activated, I'll go to settings and configure my S3 bucket. So you can see here that it's already been configured. Everything's been set up. So you can see deliver offloaded media has been turned on, and then see everything with the configurations to allow me to upload media. So what I'll do now is upload a form of media. So you can see here I've already got one of the files that I uploaded. So what I'll do now is just upload a new file. Let's see here, if I go to pictures, screenshots, and I'll use something like just a random image. So I've got a PNG file that was used for my web development class here in the bottom left. So you can see here that's been uploaded. And now if I go back to my plugins and I go to offload media settings, you should see here that I've got two forms of media that haven't been uploaded, obviously, because I don't have the upgrade or the subscription, which would require a payment. But since they are showing up in the not offloaded section, that confirms that they would be able to be registered in the S3 bucket. So now I'll test the auto scaling group by terminating the scaled PHP server. So the objective is to terminate this instance, and then hopefully to show the auto scaling group is working correctly, it will deploy a new EC2 instance automatically. So what I'll do now is go to instance state, I'll terminate the instance, and then I'll wait for the instance to be terminated, and then hopefully there will be a new instance deployed shortly. So now after a little while, I can observe that a new EC2 instance has been deployed. So you can see here that it's passed the status checks and it's now running. So you can see here under the scaled PHP server details, it's been deployed in the private app subnet 1, which means it's working correctly. And you can also see if I click on auto scaling groups and I select the WordPress ASG and I go to activity, you can see here at 11:08, which is the current time that an instance was launched in response to an unhealthy instance needing to be replaced, which means that the instance that was terminated was recognized by the auto-scaling group, and therefore a new instance was deployed. So now I'll test connectivity to that new PHP server. So what I'll do now is select the EC2 instance that was just created by that auto-scaling group, and I will use connect and see here I will be able to successfully connect via session manager to that EC2 instance. So you can see who am I get SSM user, which means it's working correctly. So what I'll quickly do also to demonstrate connectivity to the instance, I'll use the Bastion host and a PuTTY terminal to connect via SSH. So what I can do now is quickly jump into a PuTTY window. What I'll do firstly, I cannot connect directly to the PHP server because it's in a private subnet. So what I'll do is connect to the Bastion host first, and then through the Bastion host, I'll be able to connect to the PHP server because I've configured the security group to allow access from the Bastion host. So what I'll do is quickly just click connect. You can see SSH client, and I'll use this EC2 username and copy that to put into the IP host address. And now I will go under authentication credentials, and I'll browse and I'll click on that admin key, PPK key, and I'll open the terminal. You can see here not cached. I'll just accept that. And you can see here I'm connected to the Bastion host. So another who am I connection, EC2 user. It's working correctly. So now what I'll do is I can go back to instances and I can select the scaled PHP server and click connect. And I can copy this command here, this SSH command here, which uses the admin.pem key. So what I've done prior to this video is converted the admin ppk file to a PEM file. So now what I can do is just copy that into the Bastion host terminal, and I can type yes, and you can see that I can now connect to the PHP server. So finally, I'll test my WordPress database and test the multi-AZ is correctly enabled. So what will happen is I will reboot the primary database here, and that should theoretically switch the region from 1A to the secondary zone, which is 1B. So what I'll do now is I'll hit reboot for this database, and I will reboot with failover. Then I'll confirm that. Then I'll wait a second and you should see that the region will change to 1B momentarily. After waiting a couple of minutes, you can see here that the WordPress database has changed back to the available state after the reboot. And you can see here that the region has changed to US East 1B, which is the secondary zone that has been declared in the configuration for that database, which confirms the multi-area zone availability. So now that I've covered the phase 1 services, I'll move on to the CloudFormation services for phase 2 of this video. So now I'll cover CloudFormation in phase 2 of this video. I will be going through the 2 separate stacks that I've created. So I've created a network and application stack, as they have different life cycles and need to manage services separately. So you can see here in the network stack, if I click on that one, you can see the description notes a network stack with VPC, subnets, internet gateway, NAT gateway, and route tables. So if I click on the resources tab here, you can see that I have created these resources here. So it's got pretty much the exact same services that were created manually in phase 1 of this video. And if I also go onto template, and you can see here, I've uploaded a YAML file here, which includes things like parameters and then obviously the resources themselves. And if I continue to scroll down, you can see here that I have these outputs here. So I also use these outputs as parameters for the application stack when I configure that stack. So I can also view this in IAC, or the infrastructure composer. And you can see here I have the VPC component, and then all the different services have been grouped and highlighted under that component. So now I'll go back and show the application stack here. If I go back to stack info, you can see I've got the description. So this is the full WordPress stack with the application load balancer, auto scaling group, RDS database, the S3 bucket, and then the respective security groups. So I've maintained a pretty similar approach to what I did in the manual creation of services. So you can see here under the resources tab, I've got different security groups, I've got target groups, I have the AMI instance, and then obviously things like the auto scaling group, the bucket, and then the database here. You can see that through for most of these components, I've used the exact same configuration details. So you'll find for the application load balance security group, for example, that if I open that up and I click on this one here, you can see that it's got that inbound rule for the port 22 traffic from the Bastion security group. So if I go back now, I'll also quickly show you the template here. So you can see it's quite long. I tried to use the infrastructure composer to automatically scan my existing environment after I manually created the services in phase 1 and allow that to generate a template for me. It didn't work out kind of the way I wanted, and it didn't give me as much control over the resources that I was hoping for. So I ended up just creating a whole new YAML file from scratch. So you can see here it uses the VPC components as parameters for this application stack, and then obviously I have the different resources. So I've got the security groups here. So you can see there is a security group for the PHP server, the database, the application load balancer, and then the AMI server, as well as the Bastion instance. And then obviously the target group, the load balancer here, and the listener, as well as the PHP launch template. So this uses the user data to install and run the WordPress application. So you can see if I keep scrolling, I've got obviously the instance deployments. So I'm deploying the Bastion instance in the public subnet 1, and then you can see here that AMI instance is being deployed in public subnet 2. And then if I scroll down to the auto scaling group, you can see here that I've declared the minimum scaling size and the max scaling size, as well as the desired capacity. And I've also declared the private subnets as the subnets for the instances to be deployed in. And then you can see I'm also using the launch template that I had highlighted earlier up the top here. And then you can see I've got the scaling policy. So the target value is 50. So I can use 25%, which is the required value to scale in, and then 70%, which is the scale out value, which uses this average CPU utilization target. So you can see here, I've also got the S3 bucket configured, and then obviously the DB subnet group. And then here I've got the primary RDS instance, which uses the different identifiers, obviously, uses the 8.0.35 engine. I've got my password, which normally isn't best practice for security, but for the purposes of this demonstration, I've just left it visible here so you can observe the password. And then obviously I've got multi-AZ enabled on this primary database. And you can see here I've got the replica database, and then you can see here I haven't declared multi-AZ because to allow the ability to declare an availability zone, you have to turn multi-AZ off when configuring in a YAML file. So I've done that there. You can see here that if I open the infrastructure composer component up, it's got the map of all my services here that are connected. So now what I'll do is I'll begin to test my CloudFormation stacks for WordPress availability. So I'll now start to test my CloudFormation services that are used to create the separate WordPress application. So what I'll do first is go into load balancers, and you can see here this load balancer has been created by the application stack in the CloudFormation service. So what I'll do is I'll copy that DNS name and I'll paste it into a new web browser, and that opens up the WordPress application. So I'll go through the process again just to show that everything works correctly. So I'll configure the database. Now what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll switch to RDS, and I'll go to the database that was created by the application stack. So you can see here I've got WordPress CFDB and then the WordPress CF replica, which was created from the primary database. You can see here that it's been deployed in the US East 1B region, but I will be testing multi-AZ availability later to show that that works. So what I'll do now is I'll quickly jump into the WordPress CloudFormation database, and I'll go into configuration. You can see it uses pretty much the exact same details. So I'll put in WordPress here, and then if I go back, I'll drag that over quickly. You can see it uses admin as well. And I've also used the same password, so I'll quickly copy this from the sticky note that I've got open here and paste that in. And then I'll remove the default localhost, and I'll go back to connectivity, and I'll copy the endpoint for the CloudFormation database. I'll paste it in, and I'll submit. And it's ready to run the installation, but obviously I've already installed it. So now I'll log in with my other CloudFormation user. So you can see here it's the CF user. So now I'm in the CloudFormation site. So what I'll do now is I'll go to plugins and I'll install the WP Offload Media plugin. And that way I'll be able to upload a new media file to verify that it can offload the media successfully. So what I'll do now is go to settings. You can see the same configurations have been added. So everything works successfully here. I can deliver offloaded media. So now what I'll do is I'll go to media, and I will add a new media file. So for instance, I use this logo here in my original task submission. So I'll upload that. It's been uploaded. I'll refresh just to verify. Alright, so I'll go back now to plugins, and I'll actually click on install plugins settings. And then now if I click on this one, it has successful upload. or offload, sorry. What I will do is actually just upload one more media file just to show that it's working properly and it's not just a copy from my phase 1 video. So for instance, if I got anything that looks, alright, so I've got the diagram of the program here. That's been uploaded. Now if I go to install plugins and back to settings, and I click on this, you can see that it now has 3 not offloaded. So that works successfully. So I'll now connect to the web server instance via Session Manager. So you can see here I've got all the different EC2 instances. So what I can do is just quickly go into VPC and I'll show you my VPCs. You can see here I've got my VPC, which is the CloudFormation VPC that was created. So what I'll do now is just copy this ID and I'll go back to EC2 just to show that it has created the instances under that VPC. You can see here it's got, again, the scaled PHP CF server, the Bastion host, and then the AMI host as well. So it also uses the same security group settings for each of these CloudFormation instances. So what I'll do now is click on the scaled PHP server and I will just actually terminate that one first. So hopefully in a couple of minutes or so after that is completely terminated, the auto scaling group will deploy a new EC2 instance. So after terminating the initial EC2 instance, you can see here that the new instance has been deployed by the auto scaling group. You can see here it's been deployed in the private subnet group and uses the CloudFormation auto scaling group, which means it's working successfully. I can also go into the auto scaling group itself and show you the activity history. So if I click on that CloudFormation ASG, you can see here that 11:47, which is the current time now, that an instance was launched in response to an unhealthy instance needing to be replaced. So now I'll connect to that new EC2 instance via the Session Manager. So what I'll do now is I'll go back to instances and I will wait for the scaled PHP CF server to finish initializing, and then I will connect via the Session Manager. Now that the scaled PHP CloudFormation server has finished initializing, I will connect to the instance via the Session Manager. So what I'll do now is connect and use the Session Manager tab. And you can see here that I can connect successfully to that instance. So now I'll move on to the database multi-AZ testing. So I'll cancel that Session Manager and I'll jump back into RDS. So you can see here I've got the WordPress CFDB and the replica. So this has been deployed in the US East 1B region. So we can see here if we go into configuration, the secondary zone is US East 1A, and we can see multi-AZ has been enabled. So what I will do is go actions and I'll reboot and click select reboot with failover, and I will confirm that. So this will reboot the CloudFormation database and in turn will change the region to the secondary zone, which will be US East 1A. So after waiting a couple of minutes, the CloudFormation database has successfully rebooted, and you can see that the region has switched to the secondary zone, which is US East 1A. So this confirms the multi-area zone availability for this database. So this concludes my presentation for task 6.1 and demonstrates the different services and CloudFormation stacks I've used to create and deploy a highly available WordPress application. Thank you.